Love often takes unexpected twists and turns, but that just makes the story more interesting.
My eye caught her, and that was it.
Oh my goodness, I think I'm falling in love with this boy.
I told my husband, if you marry me, you're going to laugh for the rest of your life.
Join us as we continue to bring to life the Canadian love stories of romance, family, friends, and community.
Well, love is the most important thing.
I can't protect my family from those feelings of loss, those feelings of grief. What I can do is I can walk with them, give them the tools that they need, let them know that life will continue, let them know that my love will continue forever. And this whole process is just the end of this realm. The spirit continues. The spirit will always love you. The spirit will always guide you. And I will envelop you in love when you need it, Danielle.
They'll never stop believing that.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Canadian Love Map podcast. We've got a really amazing Mother's Day podcast for you today. It may not be predictable, but it's rich, it's meaningful, and it's absolutely brimming with love and joy. I'm joined by Madison, who, as you probably know, is always on the lookout for amazing podcast guests. And as it happened, she found these guests right in our own Podstarter backyard.
Yes, so Dani and Marion are joining us today, and they have a podcast coming out June 21st called Before I Go, and it is really centered around their story and their relationship.
It's not simple, is it?
No, and no mother-daughter duo really is that simple, is it?
It's very true. Wise words from a young woman, Maddie.
Yeah.
You know, this podcast is really special. It's a mother and daughter duo who are having conversations about the deepest, most difficult subjects, but also the deepest kind of love you can imagine, because the communication is so open. And I actually think this episode is a Mother's Day gift to all the mothers and daughters out there in an unexpected way. Marion and Dani, welcome.
It's great to be here.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Oh, I'm so looking forward to what I expect will be a very rich conversation. And I'd like to actually start in an unpredictable way, perhaps, by asking you each to describe the other. I wonder, maybe Marion, I'll start with you. Can you tell me about your daughter?
I've said it before. I have been so fortunate to give birth to my best friend. Danielle is really one of the most incredible, strong, opinionated, bossy. She's just this incredible person. And it has been an absolute honor, privilege, and a huge pain in the butt to be her mother. One of the best parenting advice I got was from my mother, who said that your child will reveal themselves to you, and it's up to you to protect that and nurture that. And so she came out bossy as all heck. And there I was just negotiating with the 2-year-old. And that has always been who she is. She came out as a leader. We knew she was a leader.
Dani, I wonder if you would describe your mom.
My mom is a superhero. She is incredibly strong. She is resilient. She is kind. She has this empathic core where that's just who she is. You know, growing up, I almost thought it had a martyr quality. But as I got older, it was just, I realized what a strength it was, her ability to be there for others, for her family, for our communities, and now her recent stint in the political arena, and I've just been very fortunate to be able to look up to this person who is just as strong, just as stubborn, just as bossy, and really learn from her. I've mentioned before to her that I just felt like sometimes I felt like I was just trying to keep up with her. But I've been very appreciative being able to have a mom, a best friend, a confidant, and somebody to push me and support me in equal measure.
Thank you so much, Tina. I think a lot of that came from my mom. Because if we're talking about mother-daughter relationships, my mother was incredible, an absolute amazing mother, amazing grandmother. She wasn't perfect. She was kind of goofy. She laughed at her mistakes, but incredibly, she led with her heart. She cried at the drop of a hat. If you were crying, she was crying with you. As somebody who lived through the incredible racism in Canada and gone to the Indian hospitals, which were these horrible, horrible places, and gone to the Indian residential school and lived through the racism, lived through the misogyny that is Canada, and still managed to have an easy smile and just lead with a very kind heart. I've tried to emulate that.
That's so powerful. It's easy to smile when your path is easy. But and often people don't even, often people when their path is easy, they still find reasons to be angry and upset. But when you've had a path such as your peoples have had, it's extraordinary to know that you hold a gentle heart and compassion toward others.
Yeah, thank you.
I just want to witness that and say thank you. So tell me a little bit, if you would, Dani. I don't mean to throw your friends' mothers under the buses, but tell me this. Could you tell the difference when you were a child that your mother was not the same as other mothers?
I don't know if I would compare because, both my mom and I have a history in counseling, so we went to school to be counselors. I was taught early on not to compare.
Oh,
It
that's good.
was focus on your own experiences, your own perspective. But from my own experience growing up with my mom, she was always present. She was always supportive. And that support came at multiple levels. Sometimes that support hurt
Mhm.
because we have this family philosophy where, you know, our ancestors made this family tradition where it's like with every generation, you push them up, you elevate them. We have this natural evolution in our family. But that's not to say that you make them better. That's not part of it at all. She took that role very seriously. As a young mom, she read all the parenting books, she went to classes. So just as much as she was pushing and elevating the next generation, she was doing that for herself. Because, as we've mentioned, we have a lot of trauma in our communities and our families. But intergenerational healing is a superpower. And she has that, and she's run with it every day of her life.
Mhm. I love the lesson you just taught me. I'm always saying that comparison and judgment are such damaging forces in our society, but you just took me right out of that comparison mode, and I appreciate it. I also love the idea that while you walk with your ancestors' traumas, and we all do, you also walk with their strength and their beauty.
We're descended from the best of the best.
Yeah.
And I take that responsibility very seriously.
We're actually quite fortunate because I come from a 13,000 plus year old village in northern British Columbia. And I can stand on the beach where my ancestors stood. And that's where we get our strength. We're being held up by our ancestors just by standing on that beach and feeling that connection. That wasn't taken from us. Yeah, there was an interruption with a number of things within Indigenous culture, but that wasn't taken away.
Thank you for that image and that truth from your lineage. It's really beautiful. Tell me, Danielle, how did you get into film and TV? How did you both get into that world?
As I'm second generation, I'll let Mom start.
I figured I wanted to be inclusive, Danny, but I figured it started with her.
Well, with other kids, they earned their allowance by mowing the lawn and things like that. My kids grew up transcribing, shot listing, cutting gels. And if you look at Danielle's resume, the first thing on there is that I started as a sandbag in the film industry. And it was, I get one of my kids to stand on the C stand to hold the light up. And, they were just the right size.
Right place, right time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and because the industry was it took over your life, I would bring my children with me. And so all three of them have started in the industry. My boys were about 8 when they started traveling with me, and they were cutting gels and setting up lights in the studio because they were independent productions. And Danielle started as a sandbag.
I've never seen a resume that starts like that before, but I love it.
When it starts from when you're 9 years old, yeah.
Yes. Marion, tell me, if you would, how you got into the world of film and TV.
Yeah, I started in the, what was that, mid-'80s in radio. Worked in radio and then eventually got hired into a TV station. And then there was this huge technological shift in the industry. I caught the tail end of film. I caught the tail end of, the great big beta tapes they used to have.
Oh, I remember them well.
And so my husband and I decided it was time to move. My husband was working in radio. And we decided it was time to move to the lower mainland of British Columbia and retrain. And we both got to Vancouver and hit the ground running.
Mm-hmm.
And then I moved into Indigenous television, where we did an episodic magazine program.
Was that exciting for you to be able to all of a sudden take this career that you were forging and turn it into a world that was so meaningful to you?
Yes and no. I mean, I didn't want to be pigeonholed into anything. The job that I had taken in Indigenous television offered so many opportunities. I started as a PA one week, and within the next week, I was the production coordinator. And then the week after that, I became the post supervisor. I had so many opportunities, and then I became a director.
I understand not wanting to get pigeonholed. You want to tell the stories that are important to you culturally, but you also, I'm sure, want everyone to tell those stories. And I hope that's happening more now.
Well, yes, it has, because I've also lived through the racism. I worked in news. I worked as an ENG editor. I did a couple of brief stints as a director for a live newscast. And when I was first training, there were just comments that were made. You know how everybody's on their headsets and you're in master control in the studio, and there was a story that ran about a nation that just signed a treaty. And the comment that came over the headset was, "We should have just killed them all when we first got here."
Oh
That wasn't uncommon.
my, wow.
These kind of comments we got all the time. And it's difficult because there is part of me that wanted to stay in mainstream media and fight that fight.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, like many things in life, I had to be twice as good and work twice as hard to prove that I had any kind of value.
And you made room for you.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And you're completely unapologetic of just sort of making your way in there.
Here I am.
And that's it.
Watch out, because here I come.
It wasn't just her career that she paved a way for. It was the careers of so many Indigenous filmmakers, news, anyone in the entertainment, because both of my parents, and especially my mom, took on these teacher roles for so many. I tease her sometimes where it's like, you know what? You don't have to mom everybody. But there were so many productions and stuff where these young people would come in and she would take them and walk them through and support them and encourage them, and that's why 30 years later, she still has people who she's friends with in the industry. You know, we talk about being behind the scenes. We've worked our entire careers to stay behind the camera. But when we hear about, oh, you have a reputation and it's a really, really good reputation, we're both like, what? I didn't know that. And it still like catches us off guard. But yeah, I've been very, very lucky to have such an amazing role model, not just in her career, but as a mom, as a best friend.
You've talked about being a producer and a director, and I know that embodies a lot of control. When you're a director, you're literally controlling things. You are the controller of the program or of the film or whatever you're dealing with. And at some point, Marion, you came to a point in your personal journey where you realized you couldn't be the producer or the director, and your health betrayed you. I guess that's a very negative way of saying it, but your health prevented you from really being in charge. Can you tell me about that?
Actually, to be honest, that was even before my health became an issue.
Oh, please
I believe film and television in the aspects that we worked in it is a young person's game. I was getting tired of the 12, 15-hour days. And so I decided to go back to school. We got to the point where our youngest has gotten through, we got him out of high school and into college and was leaving home. And my husband said, okay, it's your turn.
Oh,
You go and do what you want. And the nerd in me wanted to go back to school. So I was doing my MBA. And so in the middle of my MBA, I was diagnosed. But prior to being diagnosed with pulmonary hypertension, I had shown the symptoms for 3 or 5 years, Danielle. The problem with pulmonary hypertension is it exhibits itself in many different ways. It looks like asthma. It looks like you're kind of out of shape. It looks like many different things. And that's what they told me every time I went back to the doctor. It's like, oh, you can lose like 20, 10, 20, 30 pounds. You maybe if you exercise a little more, maybe it's an allergy. Oh, it's asthma. So I was treated for all of that.
that gives me the chills, by the way. I think that you were shamed in some way when you had a legitimate and serious health concern.
That's more common than you'd think.
Yeah,
That's more common than you think when it comes to Indigenous
of course.
patients in Canada.
Mhm.
So here I am in the middle of my doing my MBA. I had taken some courses at the University of Arizona, and the elevation is roughly 2,000 feet. I can't remember. It's something like that. And I had taken an Airbnb close to the university. It was like 4 blocks away. I could just walk away and go to my classes. I had to leave 2 hours early because I couldn't even walk.
Oh,
I was, it felt like my heart was going to beat out of my chest as I'm just slowly making my way. Take 20 steps and stop. Take 20 steps and stop. And it wasn't until after I had gotten back and went to go see the doctor again. But just a precursor to the story is my sister passed away from pulmonary hypertension. She died 2 years after her diagnosis. And so I had even asked them, it's like, is this what my sister had? Because it sure looks a lot like what my sister had. And we were told it was a rare condition, and that let's just follow all of these other things. So asthma, acid reflux was actually considered. So we finally, in the midst of this, my studies, I get to the doctor, and they give me the diagnosis of pulmonary hypertension. I had just watched my sister die from this, a long, slow, painful death. Pulmonary hypertension has no cure. Pulmonary hypertension is progressive.
how long ago were you diagnosed?
7 years ago, I was given 5 to 7 years to live.
Well, it doesn't surprise me that you have outlived their expectation. May I say that? Just having met you 30 minutes ago, uh, you you have an amazing life force.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I think we definitely don't discredit family and community support, and the role that plays in health and healing. Because when she was diagnosed, I've been to pretty much all of her doctor's appointments, all of her hospital stays. I became a caregiver when symptoms became pretty severe. Yeah, it was difficult. It has been difficult, because like she said, we had just watched my aunt pass away from it. And it devastated both of us and our entire family because it just felt like this doomsday clock started on my time with my mom. So it shifted our relationship again.
We couldn't share the great stories that we do here on the Canadian Love Map podcast without the amazing support of Charm Diamond Centres. They are Canada's largest family-owned jeweler, and they're proud to be putting love on the map. The folks at Charm Diamond Centres are thrilled to be a part of your love story. So visit charmdiamondcenters.com or one of your local stores. Love starts here. It's always so powerful to think about that saying that, well, none of us is getting out of here alive. Our time is limited. That is the nature of being human beings. But it comes crashing in through a brick wall when you get a diagnosis like this, and
My sister's death wasn't the only death. 3 months before that, my mother passed away from ovarian cancer. And so she taught me how to walk this end of life journey. Right from the beginning, my mother did her master's degree in divinity from the Vancouver School of Theology and was planning to do her doctorate. And she had just finished her 26th round of chemo. And the doctors came in and said, there's nothing else we can do. And so they gave us a book to fill out all her end of life decisions. And I just cried through that as I'm just writing down what she's answering the questions. And it was probably one of the hardest things I've done. And then we closed up the book and we put it aside. She picked up another book. She goes, I think I'll write my PhD thesis on Native nations and spirituality. And I'm
I'm
just
sorry to laugh, but that is just like, What a joyful inspiration. Like
I am snuttling. I am in tears, and it's like, but you're dying. You're dying. We just wrote all this out. You're dying. And she said, no, I'm not. Until I take my last breath, I'm living. So when I was diagnosed and I laid down for 3 weeks and refused to get out of bed, it took a while to find that fight again. Now I just hang on to it. Until my last breath, I am living.
when did the two of you decide to do a project around this kind of acceptance of your journey?
Mom has been talking about her decision to use medical assistance in dying a while ago. It's probably been a couple of years. And she did it in such a supportive and loving way where it wasn't a group text, it wasn't a family chat. It was going to each person, each family member, and having a conversation with them. And our family is spread out throughout BC. Like, we're in like 3 different major hubs. And so having that conversation with every family member took a while. But when she told us that when her pH progresses to the point where there's no other medical intervention, there's no other way to improve her quality of life, she would like to use medical assistance in dying, the MAID program.
Mm-hmm.
And, as I talk about in our podcast, it broke me. And after she had that conversation with me, there was just this immediate instinct to pull back, to reject it. And I was like, nope, you're always going to be here. We're going to fight this. We're going to win. Like I said, I've been with my mom throughout her entire PH journey. And I have seen what this illness has stripped away from her. I have a niece and nephew, her beautiful grandchildren. And because of her illness, she's not supposed to lift anything over 10 pounds. So she can't pick up her grandchildren. She can't hold them. She used to be my go-to travel buddy. She can't do that because even healthy lungs, when you go on a plane, it drops to like 12%. Well, that percentage is devastating for a PH patient because you need constant oxygen. And so when we had that conversation that she's like, you know what, I don't think I can travel anymore, it was another sense of loss because my travel buddy was grounded now. And so when we decided to do this podcast, we've learned a lot being medical advocates. We've learned a lot evolving our mother-daughter relationship. And I don't think that this is an uncommon experience on Turtle Island in Canada. And I think we need to start that conversation. Let's talk about the hard stuff. Let's talk about the things that maybe we don't want to address. But one of the lessons that Mom has always taught me, we cannot fix what we don't address. And so this is us addressing it.
Let's normalize the conversation. Let's talk about the hard stuff. One of the things that, in the midst of looking after my mother, my dad came into my home and he was just angry. And he was just lashing out and he was spitting venom. Our counseling background teaches us that anger is secondary emotion to sadness. And what he was sad. He's losing the love of his life. After that, when we realized it was sadness, that it was helplessness, we called in some healers into our house in Vancouver. My husband and I, my children, my mom. And he called us people of the buffalo, which was kind of weird because we're coastal. It's for thousands of years. But people of the buffalo, the people of the buffalo, when they're on the plains and they see the storm coming, everybody else turns and runs away. People of the buffaloes, they stand and they face it. They face it, and sometimes they even run into it. And the storm is over faster. And that's what we do, is we face it. One of the things I like to do is introduce the elephant in the room. All right, we're having a really hard day today. I want to acknowledge that I'm just really stressed out about a job. So blah blah blah. If that comes in any other way, then please just give me a hug. Something I'm teaching my husband is that sometimes they might come in and be angry about something, and just give me a hug. And so it's learning to hold space for all of those things. So it's not always pretty, and we don't always do it right. But we are forever students. We are always learning, and we're always learning how to do things differently. So when it came to doing this podcast, we've never done a podcast before. I've done documentaries, I've done magazine programs, I've done all these different things. I've even worked in radio, but I've never done a podcast. But there's one thing that Indigenous people do well, and I said it earlier, is that we do death and dying well. We have roles, we have ceremony, we have all of these things that hold space for that. And we don't have the answers. And more often than not, I have more questions than answers. But you get a lot of the information you need when you know the right questions to ask. Mm-hmm. And so, maybe that makes a pretty good podcast.
It's an amazing contributive podcast. I think a lot of podcasts are meant to be contribution in some form, but the depth of your contribution in this is, I just think it's extraordinary. I can't help but wonder what it is giving you at the same time.
Legacy feeds my curiosity. It allows me to learn something as I'm in the midst of this. The whole thing will be documented. We're also doing a documentary around my actual use of MAID. Mm-hmm. And there, again, that was a conversation I had with my family. I had the conversation with my husband, who was the first one to say, no, we can't do this. That's way too personal. We can't do this. Then he came back and he said, I understand. Let's do it. And so even my almost 90-year-old father has agreed to support me in this. I've had family members who've used the precursor to MAID. I've known of other people to have used it. And in the process of caring for my sister, she had hung on to anything, absolutely anything that could extend her life. And she went to her grave just praying and wishing for a lung transplant that never came. And the nurse came and talked to me and said, I think if she goes, we just let her go. Because I've done CPR on patients. I've broken ribs. It was very traumatic for family members. It's very traumatic for the person. And so we decided as a family to let her go, surrounded by peace and love. And it was a beautiful experience. We surrounded her with love. We told her everything we loved about her. She was joking right up until the end. We spoke to her 20 minutes before she passed. And it was a beautiful experience. And so if I can do something like that at the end of my life, in the form of maid, then I want that.
Marion, do you feel that your sister's resistance to death in some way has enabled your acceptance of it? Is that a strange question?
I don't know. I think we were in very different places because, there in many respects I was still angry. What a shitty deal she got.
Hmm.
I had a very major health scare in the summer. I had a severe blood infection and I was given a 50-50 chance of living through the night. And Danielle was out of town working on a different project. I called her up and was like, "Hey, Dan, I'm okay. I'm in the hospital, but I'm okay." Well, I wasn't okay.
Hmm.
But it's trying to protect them. I can't protect my family from those feelings of loss, those feelings of grief. What I can do is I can walk with them, give them the tools that they need, let them know that life will continue, let them know that my love will continue forever. And this whole process is just the end of this realm. The spirit continues. The spirit will always love you. The spirit will always guide you. And I will envelop you in love when you need it, Danielle.
They'll never stop believing that.
Danielle, what gift is the podcast giving you? I think it seems kind of obvious from that powerful exchange.
These conversations are not new for us. On our other podcast, we have difficult conversation. There's tears. There's a retelling of arguments, and we reassure our team. It's like we don't need to fix feelings. When we start crying or arguing or anything, we feel them, we go through them, and then they're gone. So these conversations, I know what a gift they are. I know the relationship I have with my mom is unique. It's enduring. And I am so grateful that we have pushed ourselves, elevated ourselves to the point where we get to cry together. We get to laugh together. We get to have adventures together. And leaving this legacy is another adventure, as painful as it can get sometimes.
You talked about not having a travel buddy anymore, Dani, because Marion can't actually fly and go off to Mexico. But it seems to me you are traveling, you're exploring a whole new landscape.
That's definitely pretty accurate.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. And I think we're both very open to that. And when it comes to our podcast, Before I Go, is just all of those conversations we want to have before I go.
It seems to me that this podcast of yours will be an opportunity for a lot of mothers and daughters to crack open communication, whether there is illness or health, good health. It will be an open door for them to enter this landscape with you and to go, oh, we can communicate a whole lot more fully than we have up until now. That's like what, some people may think this is a surprising or unpredictable Mother's Day episode of the Love Map podcast. But to me, this is love, man. This is love, woman, I should say. It is love in action.
Well, thank you. I mean, I believe that that whole process we went through with my mother was the same thing, except it happened on social media.
Mm.
And so this is an extension of that. But as you said earlier, and something I've said in the past, is none of us get out of this alive. So how do we prepare ourselves for that? How do we deal with that? I think it's important for people to have these difficult conversations. And like Danielle said, you don't have to fix emotions. If you're angry, if you're sad, if you're, scared, feel it and you let it pass through your body. And we work very hard to be present right now at this moment. Danielle and I are participating in another podcast and enjoying the opportunity to share these stories, to share these conversations.
Some people, I'm sure, are shocked by your openness and willingness to talk about death or living until the last breath. And that's, I think, because we hold such stigma around death in our society. So I am deeply inspired by what you're doing. And I could talk to you all day. I'm telling you, it's very hard for me to wrap up this conversation because I have so many questions. And really, I'm just going to have to listen. I'm going to have to tune in and learn from your wisdom and your deep sense of presence, both of you. I want to say thank you so much. Marion, how do you want Dani and your children and your grandchildren to remember you?
I want them to remember me for who I actually am. You hear those stories of people who died and, he'll give the shirt off his back. It's like, that's a lot of BS. I also told my kids a long time ago, if anybody says I'd give the shirt off my back, it's like, no, get your own damn shirt. I think what I want is them to remember me authentically. Smart, funny, resilient, stubborn, goofy, just a big nerd who loved to learn and take classes and can hold weird conversations about things that nobody else had any interest in, but I read about it. And, I want my children and grandchildren to be who they are, who they were meant to be. I believe that everybody was put on this earth with a contract with the Creator. And it's up to you to figure out what that contract was, because only you can fulfill that. And so when it comes to my children, I know they are incredible people. Danielle, Christian, Jacoby are my pride and joy. They gave me a reason for living when I couldn't live for just myself. And from there, I got to develop into the weird and wacky woman you see before you. But with my grandchildren, it's almost different. Brian is this amazing little spitfire who's afraid of nothing. And he doesn't care what anybody thinks about him. I want that. Nurture that. And my granddaughter, Marion, they named her after me. I was like, oh, my Lord. She is going to be her own person. She's going to be strong. She's going to be funny. She's smart. She's 3 months old. And you could already see that fire in her belly.
Watch out. Here comes another Marion. Oh my goodness. I I want to tell you, I'm going to speak my inner thought. I have this instinct. I just want to go to the airport, buy a ticket, fly out and meet you in person. I really do. Like, that is what my absolute instinct is in the cells of my body. And whether or not we get to meet in person, I want to say how deeply grateful I am that we got to meet in this way. And the fact that you are doing this tremendously meaningful podcast allowed me the opportunity to have this conversation with you. You are just, oh my gosh, you're just so beautiful, both of you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you very much. And we just love the opportunity just to share these conversations. So thank you for inviting us onto your podcast.
Well, we will share with everyone how to find yours, and I will shout it from the rooftops. Thank you, Marion. Thank you, Dani, so much. Thanks so much for listening to the Canadian Love Map. This podcast is presented and made possible by Charm Diamond Centers. It's hosted by me, Nancy Regan, and is produced and distributed by Podstarter. We love sharing love stories of all kinds, and that could include yours. So do you or someone you know have an uplifting tale to tell? Reach out to us on Facebook or Instagram using @CanadianLoveMap or email producer@podstarter.io. We'll be back next week with another love story to add to the map.